Hello guys and welcome back, and as I promised, here's the second video today which completes the high level wall cupboard build of our Mercedes Sprinter van conversion. I hope you found all the detail that I put into the first one interesting and useful to you, and I hope you'll enjoy this one just as much. As with the first video, any of the materials or tools that I use in this video I'll put links in the description below if you're looking to source something similar for yourself. Oh, and don't forget, if you want one of these t-shirts, just click on the little red bubble symbol at the header of my YouTube channel and you'll be the proud owner of one of your own. So without further ado, let's get stuck into the build. So that's all the bedroom cupboards now complete. Just got to have the doors hung on there, both sides. And then we're just coming through this side of the partition now with the kitchen cupboards. We've got a nice big cupboard there, which we can store all our food and cereals and stuff like that. And then there's a little cupboard at the end here where all these wires are. This is where all the control panels are going to go at the end of this unit. And I'm just pre-drilling some holes. We're just going to fix on this bottom shelf. Got the aluminium trim obviously fitted underneath all of these wall cupboards. In the kitchen we've brought the trim right to the front of the cupboard so that it's about halfway over the kitchen work surface. So it should shed a lot more light than if it was at the back. The bedroom one's obviously at the rear there. And now all I'm doing is I'm just sticking in this LED strip light before we put the diffuser on. We've gone for a bright white LED over the kitchen cupboards just to give us a white light just for cooking with, rather than the coloured light. The coloured lights do give a white light, but it doesn't tend to be as good as these ones which are just pure white. At this end of the kitchen cupboards I'm going to have a false door to house all of the controls. So what we've got here is the LCD control for the Truma heater. We've got the control for the solar charge controller, the controller for the mains battery charger, and also the water level indicator for the tanks underneath the chassis. So I'm just laying these out at the moment to get an idea of how much space I'm going to need to leave on the front of this cupboard to get these in nicely so they're not too crowded. And then the rest of the cupboard to the left hand side of those will be a proper cupboard door for kitchen stuff. For the high level wall cupboard doors, I want to get it out of one piece of furniture board so that all the doors along that wall match in terms of the grain. So what I've done is I've just marked these left side 1, 2, 3 and the kitchen, and then what we'll do is we'll keep these labels on to make sure that these doors don't get out of sequence. This is one of the door blanks. Obviously we want to make sure that we're on the upper edge. The hinge is going to be at the top of the door and on the back of the door. First thing I always do is put down some tape so I can mark on it. And then with your ruler you want to find the centre, which in our case is 275, and each of the hinge positions, and I'm basically coming in 100mm from either end. We've got a stack of door blanks here and I'm just about to drill the holes for the hinges. So first thing we want to do is drill a test piece with a Forstner bit, which I've done on this little blank here, and then just make sure that that's deep enough to recess that part of the hinge without going through to the other side. On the edge of each door I've marked the centre of the door, and then I've marked each of the hinge positions. And then what you want to get yourself is one of these little templates. They usually come with the hinges, or you can buy them separately. And then on one side you can see it's got circles, which is the recess for one part of the hinge, and on the other side it's got the drilling locations for the counterpart of the hinge. and then all you do is put it on the edge of the door, line it up with your pencil mark in that little triangle there, and then you can mark the centre hole for the drill bit. I've got a few things on the bench in front of me here, so let's just go through it. I've got my stack of door blanks all ready to go. We've already drilled the holes ready for the hinges, and now we've got to put the trim on the edge. But what I've done is I've just mocked up a couple of samples of hinges. I bought these hinges from a caravan supplies place online, and these are the standard sort of thing that you'd fit on your cupboard doors in a motorhome or caravan. I've made a little mock-up, but there's a few things that I'm not really happy about with these hinges. First of all, you've got fixed positions for the screws. There's no adjustment in these, so you've got to get the door hanging exactly right. Otherwise, if it's off at all, there's no way of moving it. The action on these is really loose. As you can see, there's no resistance there, so when you shut your cupboard door, it's just going to slam. And especially with these overhead cupboards, if you let go of it, that's just going to drop. So you're going to need some sort of support, either a gas hinge or something like that, to keep that cupboard door open. On this other mock-up, what I've gone for is a traditional kitchen hinge. These particular ones are soft close. They've got a little piston inside there that when you actuate the hinge, it just puts a little bit of resistance to it closing. The other advantage with these hinges is underneath this cover here, you've got two adjustment screws, so you can change the throw of the door, you can also change the height of the door, you can square them up on the cabinet. There's a lot more range of movement with this hinge to get your doors looking nice and square and get your gaps nice and even. So this gives you a lot more flexibility. I've made this little mock-up as well, and you can see how it's going to work. I'm hoping that with the resistance on that hinge, when it's in the upright position, there's going to be enough resistance to hold that door in that position without me having to put a little gas strut on there. And then when you close it, obviously there's no way that door's going to slam, it's just going to close nice and gently. So we're going to go with these hinges for our motorhome. What you can see as well on this little sample is I've also used this iron-on edge trim, and this is what I'm going to be using for all my cupboard doors. I don't want to use the plastic PVC push-on trim on the cupboard doors. I think it looks a bit too chunky, and I think this gives us a nicer, cleaner look. I've got the shop iron out. I've given the face a nice clean because you don't want to get any dirt on this iron-on trim. And I've also got a new little tool that we're going to try out, which is this trimmer. So once we've put the iron-on trim on, this has got a couple of razor blades in here, run it along the edge, and it will trim it off really neatly. Let's get on with it. Okay, this is me being ultra fussy. When you put this iron-on edging on, trim this edge, you put the iron-on edging on this side and trim the edge. You can't see the edge of the previous trim if you're looking at the cupboard this way, but if you're looking at the cupboard this way, you can just see a faint line of trim there. So what I'm going to do is the bottom edge of the cupboard doors is the only edge that you'll see. So this is edging I'm going to put on last, because this will cover over the edging on the sides. I know it's a minute little detail, but I think it's worth doing. It's always advisable to pre-drill your screw holes. So what I do is I get a square, put it on the edge of the door, inset the hinge, move the square up to it, so now I know that the hinge is square to the door, and then I can mark for the screw locations, come back, drill a little pilot hole, and then we're good to screw those on. As you can see, these screws are only very tiny. This cupboard door is only 15mm thick, so with your pilot hole all you really want to do is just break through the laminate surface. The screw will then easily screw itself into the wood. A couple of little tips on drilling these holes. This laminate's quite shiny. To stop your drill bit skidding about, I always just give them a little centre punch. That will stop the drill bit from wandering. And the other tip is, because you don't want to go too deep, is just wrap a little bit of tape around your drill so there's only a little bit of that showing, and then when you drill, that little bit of tape will sweep away all your little chips, and then you know you've gone far enough. First thing we'll do is just cut a load of lengths of trim, because we're going to need quite a few for these doors. I've left a little bit of spare on this hanging over, so we've got some to trim off. I can't say this is definitely textbook method because I haven't done any research on this, but this works for me. I've applied edge banding to a number of different doors and bits of furniture. I've got the iron on a hot cotton setting. There's no water in it, it's completely bone dry. And it doesn't take too long for the glue on these thin strips to get enough heat to melt. Work from the middle outwards, making sure there's an even overhang over both sides. Put plenty of pressure on. Make sure that the iron's sitting nice and flat. And I can just make out in the light on this top of this piece of trim, I can make out the edge of the board. So I know that's probably well stuck. And then I'll go from the middle again out this side. I always put pressure lengthways along the board, because if you push to one side, the likelihood is that you'll push the piece of trim off the board, because the glue, when it melts, does get quite slippery. So just use even strokes along the length of the board, and then it won't run off the edge. I did have a situation when I started using this trim where the glue, it just literally slid off the board because I was putting the pressure on the side. Now it's pretty well stuck now. What I like to do is just run along the edge of the board with the iron on a very slight angle, and just make sure that those edges are really well secure. Just put a little bit of pressure on the edge, iron on an angle, and then it just puts a very fine crease in that trim. I can just see that in the sunlight. And then same on the ends, just a little light pressure with the iron on the angle. And that's all you need, and that'll be stuck down quite nicely. I just like to get a cold cloth, just take some of the heat out and apply a bit of pressure at the same time, just to smooth it out. And that's cooling that glue down quite quickly, and that'll set up. We'll leave that to cool down now completely. Still a bit warm to the touch. Wait for the glue to harden, and then we'll come back and trim off the edge. We'll just trim off the ends with a sharp knife before we trim the sides. I've done all the ends first on all of the doors. This is the first one we did. It's now had loads of time to cool down. We can give it a trim. Nice even pressure, continuous stroke. There we go. Sometimes find there's a tiny little bit of glue squeeze out. Just clean off with the cloth. I'll try and give you an idea of how long it takes for the glue to melt, so you know how long to leave the iron on your edge trim. The iron's on, it's hot. Here's a little bit of the edge trim. There you go, I can see that glue's melted now. Yeah, that couldn't have been more than 10 seconds or so. It says these are good for 80,000 cycles. That's 79,999 left. There we go, that's all the cupboard doors for the bedroom area of the van. All trimmed, hinges on, ready to be fitted. To mark the positions for the counterpart for these hinges, all of these openings in these cupboards are exactly the same size. I deliberately built them that way so that all I need to do is now find the centre line on this cupboard opening, and that will exactly position a door on the centre of this cupboard. And then using the dimensions that we had when we set out the hinges on the doors, I just marked out from the centre line to the same position as we marked on the doors. We used the little template again that came with the hinges, but this time we used the flip side. This has the drill locations for the counterpart of the hinge. And the same again, we want to line up in the little triangle our mark. So you can just see the little mark in the little triangle, and then we'll put a pencil dot on each of these 2 points, and then we'll drill for screws. This part of the hinge has got quite a fatter screw on it, so I've just upped my pilot bit to a 4mm bit, using the same trick as before. Just put some red tape on there to indicate the depth that I want to go to, and we're just going to drill these pilot holes. Now we can fit the door. The good part about these hinges is you can leave that part screwed on there and just locate the second part of the hinge. Beautiful. There we go, that's the first of the doors fitted. I haven't even touched any of the adjustments, and just by our measurements alone, that's sitting on there really nicely. We are going to need the gas struts because this door is too heavy for those hinges, but the nice thing is if I let go of it, it will still soft close, so no slamming of doors. Lovely job. The beauty about these hinges is you've got 4 points of adjustment, so you can really finesse these joint lines. And when you look down there, you know, you can hardly see that gap at all. Now you can see why we took the time to match the grain on these cupboards, because it actually follows right the way through from one end right the way through to the other. It just looks like one seamless board. So there we have it. I'm really pleased with how they've turned out. The lights look fantastic, and I'm really pleased that I went with that iron-on trim around the doors, because I think they look a lot neater than that push-on PVC trim. If you've liked this video and you found it useful, please do share it with other people on social media. Give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to make sure that you're subscribed, because you wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.